There are many reasons as to why I consider this opportunity to speak about Dr. Vijaya Corea to be an enormous honor to me personally. And they're all personal, so please do bear with me. The first is the fact that Dr. Corea was very close friends with my grandfather, to whom I was very close to. My grandfather, Harold Seniviratna, was a musician and ran a band for many decades. And Dr. Corea was on his stage, and my grandfather was on Dr. Corea's stage for decades. And the name Vijaya Corea was a household one to me growing up. Vijaya Corea this, Vijaya Corea that, Vijaya Corea this, Vijaya this. It was something that I had enough of, frankly, growing up. But it was all in love and deep respect to a man whose ability was absolutely incredible. And this morning, when I was looking up a few videos, I came across a video of my grandfather speaking at a ceremony such as this, a little over a decade ago, again felicitating Dr. Corea, in which he says, and he challenges Dr. Corea to go for his 50th year in broadcasting. And he says that regardless of whether he is around or not, that he should do that. But my grandfather is not with us. But it's a huge honor for me to be here talking to you about him. Secondly, Dr. Corea was also a dear friend of my own father. And they shared a very, very beautiful relationship for many years, which I recall very fondly. And thirdly, so you have grandfather, father, and now son. Dr. Corea's son, Viran, who is someone who stood by me like a rock at a time not many people would even have picked up my phone call. And so for these three reasons and so much more, this opportunity is very special to me. There was a chap named Thompson. His name was Thompson. Dr. Corea, do you remember?
Yes.
1964, I think it was. The young, strapping Vijaya walks into Radio Ceylon, I think it was at this time, to meet his cousin and at the station. And there was a chap, an American named Thompson, who was set to do a program in a few hours or minutes. It was a children's program. Now, Thompson the American didn't turn up. He didn't show up for whatever reason. And there was panic at Radio Ceylon. And Dr. Corea's cousin, the only option he had was to invite the young Vijaya to sit in for Thompson the American. Now, Dr. Corea was afraid, didn't want to have anything to do with it. He had just gone over there to meet his cousin for a conversation, a chat. But nevertheless, he was thrust into the limelight at that very moment. And he ended up doing the show with his cousin and liking it quite a bit. He went back, and I suppose in some way had a listen to his own program. I suppose it was recorded at the time, and when it was on air live, he liked the way his voice sounded. I guess he liked the response he got, and he was bitten by that broadcasting bug. So thank you, Mr. Thompson, for not turning up that day, wherever you are, whoever you are. Now I'm going to come back to that story, and there's a very important reason I told you that anecdote. Fast forward a couple of months, Vijaya Corea finds himself doing a regular show, but not as a permanent employee at Radio Ceylon. He was riding his bicycle down Havelock Road one day, and it begins to rain. And he seeks shelter at Hercules Taylor's. And he's waiting for the rain to pass, and there's a chap standing there, a stranger. He looks at him and says, "I say, are you Vijaya Corea?" Which he says, "Yes." And he says, "I listened to your show," and so on. And I said, "Have you applied for that relief announcer's position?" Now, this gentleman had no idea there was a relief announcer's position, which I assume was very rare at that time. He had no idea. He said, "No, but I will." And so this complete stranger presents an opportunity to Dr. Corea, which he then follows passionately. He somehow finds the application, fills it, and it turns out that 350 other applicants also had the same idea. Fast forward a few months, he's selected as the most preferred candidate out of 350 applicants and lands a job as a relief announcer at Radio Ceylon. Now, these two anecdotes, these two stories are important because they depict two important characteristics in this gentleman's life. The first, the fact that it was an American announcer's job that was taken by Dr. Vijaya Corea, I think, maybe in a humorous way, illustrates the fact that this man is not only a master broadcaster, but he is someone who led that Sri Lankan revolution in the broadcast industry at a time when we were just getting over that colonial hangover. Sri Lanka was still very British. Our politicians were British, educated in Britain, etc. And I can't imagine how difficult it would have been at that time for Dr. Corea to break through the many barriers that he might have faced at that time and create that space, not just for himself, ladies and gentlemen, but for guys like me. I remember traveling in my car with my family, listening to SLBC and hearing this booming voice over the airwaves, dreaming of doing something like that someday, not knowing how. But the dream was born. And to me, what Dr. Corea represented, as I heard him, was possibility, potential, the license to dream. And so as he fought through the 60s and the 70s, learning the art of broadcasting, introducing some of Sri Lanka's most well-known musical legends to the stage, he was not doing it for himself. He was redefining an industry that was taking baby steps. And in the 90s, as the private media also began to be born, he had already set a platform, a foundation for an entire generation of broadcasters. And that's what it's all about, the foundation. This building sits on a foundation. You can't see it, you can't hear it, you can't feel it, but we're sure glad there is a foundation. And that's what he represents. He represents a very Sri Lankan, a very proud transformation, transition from what was a colonial outpost to what we are today, with all our faults, proudly Sri Lankan. A man who took the fight to the Brits and beat them at their own game. He beat them at their own game. He reached a level of excellence that is unsurpassed, not in Sri Lanka, but in the world. In 1976, he was the first Sri Lankan to stand on the stage at the BMICH and host a live television event, and that was the 5th Non-Aligned Movement Summit in Sri Lanka, which to me, having done several live events in the 90s and the 2000s, is borderline preposterous. I cannot imagine hosting a live event in 1976, and yet he did it. The second story, standing outside of Hercules Taylor's and listening to the guy that he met, is more personal to him. It depicts that opportunism that lives within him. And I say this with deep respect. The opportunism that we need, not just as individuals, but as a country. It is the smallest opportunity that Dr. Corea recognized and then raced after that has resulted in him becoming who he is. And I think this is a great lesson particularly for the younger generation that is now growing into not just the media industry, but into Sri Lanka, to carry this nation forward. Opportunity rarely comes our way, as we all know, and says, hello, I'm an opportunity, grab me. Opportunity is usually in disguise. And this man, by recognizing the fact that, hey, here's an opportunity, it might be a stranger, but I'm going to grab it, displayed his leadership, his personal ambition, and that ability to go after something if you really, really want it. And so on one end, you have a man who has redefined an entire industry, maybe not just one. Broadcasting. He was an actor. He's a compeer. And on the other hand, you have a personal characteristic, a trait, which I think we would all do well, particularly the younger amongst us, to replicate, to copy, to try to be, to run after opportunities. Vijaya Corea broke glass ceilings. He taught me, he taught us, a generation of broadcasters, that it is possible to become excellent as a Sri Lankan. He laid the foundation. He was the springboard along with luminaries such as him. Ravi John, for example. They inspired us, and today we stand on the shoulders of these giants. And I wish that someday we grow up to be just like him. Sri Lanka today is looking for leadership, desperately, frustratingly looking for leadership, looking for inspiration, looking for icons. We don't have to look far. We have them right here. Dr. Vijaya Corea, you are many things. You are an actor, a broadcaster. You are a compeer par excellence. You are a chef de ceremony. But perhaps most importantly to me and to many thousands of others, you, sir, are an inspiration. So thank you for your sacrifice, for your dedication, for your commitment, and for your excellence. And my granddad is not around anymore, but if he was, and if he was standing up here speaking, he would say, well done, old boy, keep going. Thank you very much, and God bless you.